So hi peeps, I'm sorry that it's taken me so long to get this video ready. I've been busy. Anyway, this will be an overview of the literary devices for the first story that we read for Bradbury, Tomorrow's Child. The first thing you have to remember is that each one of the literary devices touches on each other. Each one of them is part of a whole that makes a good short story. And I'm doing my best to choose short stories that I feel touch on each one of these in a different way. So the 5 literary devices we're looking at are here, and then for Bradbury we're also going to be thinking about his narrative technique. It's going to be similar to Whitman. Eventually we're going to be using this as well with a graphic novel, but we're not there yet. When it comes to the characters, this presentation is on Moodle if you want to go through the previous slide more. You have to think about who are the characters first of all. Why are they there? So as I mentioned in class, I look at a short story the same way I look at a house or architecture. How is the short story built? It's built with these literary devices, and the characters are very important. In Tomorrow's Child, of course, the main, most important character is going to be the child Pi, this blue pyramid. But the mother and the father have an interesting dynamic as well. Where the father is more rational, the mother more emotional. That allows us to get, the different perspectives of what to do with this child, the main character. The doctor is there to provide some scientific explanations, etc. That's how they help build the story. So they allow the reader to go through the story and to get different perspectives. And although I didn't include it in the different extracts, there's some pretty cool little parts in the story, if you look at it again, where we also have Pi's perspective. Just this blob is coming, making whistling noises, and that blob is coming here. So it's really just a question of perspective, and that's important. To the theme of the story, okay, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But they basically allow the reader to engage in a process of reflection about some of the thematic elements, right? By seeing it from, again, different perspectives. So how do you come to a conclusion in life? Well, by examining different perspectives. We're almost touching on philosophy or logic right now. So that's their purpose. The plot is old school. Can you tell me what happens in the story? Okay, and the ending is always significant for Bradbury. There's always a little bit of a ... What happens? The climax in a short story is also debatable with Bradbury, but as long as you understand that it's a significant event, in this case I think probably I would identify the climax as the point where they decide to go back into this machine, the two of them, and enter into their child's realm. And of course the whole idea of the plot, okay, is going to be related to the theme. You can't just walk away from a story with the theme. The theme is related to what actually happened, okay, in the story. For Bradbury, this is going to be a consistent answer, okay? So science fiction, Bradbury uses to create an exaggerated imaginary world, but this exaggerated imaginary future is always a means to make us reflect on our present. And it's a testament to the beauty of the human imagination, the human mind. So you and I can live in a difficult situation, let's say even with COVID. But the imagination allows us to imagine different possibilities of where things can go. And that'll lead us to the theme. Okay, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And the genre, basically, how does it contribute to the story? Well, it brings the reader into Bradbury's imagination. He's forcing us to use our imagination to conceive of unreal things, but related again to our present. It influences the reader because it's quite shocking, right? So the very first sentence is, he did not want to be the father of a small blue pyramid. Okay, here we go. All right, so it influences the reader by creating a sense of, imagination, shock, wonder. So what do you mean the blue pyramid? What's that all about? What are you going to do with the blue pyramid? And those questions, again related, as I said, to what Walt Whitman did, is a way of engaging the reader. The setting in this story is important because the future is going to allow us to reflect on some of the things that are happening in our present. The other element of the setting is going to be between this house and the hospital. The house is also secluded, so you could imagine sometimes you can understand these questions by asking opposites. So what would the story be like if it happened downtown New York City in Manhattan? It would be a very different story. So by being secluded in some kind of country environment in California, he was able to kind of delve into other issues. And then the hospital, of course, is a place where the science occurs. So we have those two things there. They build to the theme by basically allowing us to focus on the characters and what's happening basically between the parents, the child, and the hospital. And we don't have to worry about other issues, for example, if he was living in Manhattan, for example. Okay. It influences the reader by basically creating this stable environment that we have, just two very kind of random places, their home and then the hospital. So again, we're able to focus a little bit more on some of the other questions Bradbury wants us to consider. When talking about this in class, we've had a couple of great responses. So one of the lessons could be the significance of a child and their reality. So every child is important, especially those children that society sees as being not as important as everyone else or being different. So our child was born into a fourth dimension, is a blue pyramid, like pretty much alienated from the world, and the parents made the decision to abandon their reality and comfort to go into that child's reality. And that's quite a beautiful, more family-based theme. You could also look at the theme in terms of how much power do we have over our technology. So is our technology beyond us? Do we understand how it works? And more importantly, do we understand when it doesn't work? Okay, so when things go well, that's great. What happens when they don't? Do we have the resources to, and the intelligence and the science to make those things right? So Bradbury was writing this basically just shortly after World War II, the economic boom in the United States, the houses and everything was changing dramatically. Technology was everywhere and out of control, really. If you look at it in terms of some of Bradbury's worries about war, well, the technology we were seeing coming into the homes was also being used on the battlefield. So we had like 8 million different types of super bombs, and then bigger and faster and harder guns. And so that was something that really worried him, you know, that should technology get ahead of our ethics. All right, so anyway, yeah, so I'll leave that for now. Bradbury is pretty much a poet, you know, a teacher. I see Bradbury as a word painter. Okay, so he uses adjectives and adverbs, similes and metaphors. What it does is it creates images in the reader's mind. These images are really important as a way for Bradbury to involve you in the story, in his story. And it's like a painting. I see it as a painting. When I read Bradbury, with all the adjectives and all the descriptions and the adverbs and the metaphors and everything and the dialogue, it creates this pretty vivid image in my mind. And it is very much like a painting, except, you know, it's being done in our imagination. And this brings us into the story, into the theme, how Bradbury wants to see things, how he wants to see people, events, etc. You have to remember that all authors, their goal from the beginning of a story to the end of the story is to walk you through it. So as soon as you read those very first lines, okay, so he did not want to be the father of a small blue pyramid, Bradbury is taking us on a journey in a story, or with a graphic novel, or with Whitman, I Sing the Body Electric. So we're coming through this story, and the author is holding our hands. The author is guiding us through the story, walking us through. And you can pay attention to that by looking at the language that he uses. Now, between Whitman and Bradbury, so Whitman as a poet, Bradbury as a short story genius, the two of them both have the same challenge to say what needs to be said in a very limited amount of time. So Bradbury chooses his characters, his words, his plot, everything very, very carefully, and so does Whitman. So the adjectives are meant to engage the reader. The nuance, this means the unclarity. That's something that's very specific to Bradbury. Bradbury is an author that leaves a lot of room for the reader to live and breathe and experience his stories. That means that the two of us reading the story can engage and see things in different ways. So I say, for example, what does the doctor look like? We'll all have different responses to that, the father and the mother as well. In this case, Pi, we're all going to know that he's a small blue pyramid, but Bradbury is not the explicit writer. He's a more of a writer that allows the reader to engage their imagination as much as possible, and he does that by basically, kind of subtle things, making some things clear and some things unclear. The dialogue is significant because it brings us into the world and to the ideas of our characters. Again, our characters are the people taking us through whatever situation that they're living. In some cases, Bradbury actually has some stories that have no human characters at all. One of my favorite stories is the story of a house, and there's not a single human being in there. But in these stories, we connect with this person, with the father, okay? We connect with the mother too. We connect with the scientist, and we connect with the child. And Bradbury uses different strategies to get that. And that connection is basically engaging you in the process of reflection to the main idea of the story. So we're seeing different perspectives, and you're able to say, yeah, okay, I understand the father, but I understand the mother, and I understand the child, but I also understand the doctor. And you come to that conclusion at the very end of it. Like I said, it's a very philosophical process, and that's how it helps build the theme, contributes to the story, and it influences the reader because I feel with Bradbury we're very engaged. We're more engaged when we read Bradbury than other science fiction writers that have more technical purposes. So in the past I've taught Isaac Asimov, for example. So when we talk about what is science fiction, I've often said, well, Asimov would be the science and Bradbury would be the fiction. Asimov is very detailed. This is what this person does, and everything is very, clearly organized and very easy to identify. And when you come to Bradbury, it's more of a artistic perspective, and the fiction basically thinking about science. Okay, so that's my very best. I only have a maximum of 15 minutes. I touched on quite a few things, and please forgive me. If you want to know any more information, let me know. And just remember, all of these things really do combine to create a beautiful story, and that's how I've chosen to teach literary devices. So my literary devices basically introduce you to the beauty of creating an entire story by looking at these literary devices consistently, but again relating them to the whole of a story, and not, I don't know, some random literary device and just that means nothing at all. I prefer to think about how they contribute to our experience, and so thank you.